So this has been already for me a really fantastic experience. Just listening to some of the first few speakers, Brian and Mark Canlis, I think you guys touched base on something that really has resonated with me for a while. The way you guys phrased it was a little bit differently than the way that I've heard it phrased before when you guys were talking about rules versus strategies. I think one of the things that I took away from that, and maybe that was part of the point, for any of you who are fans of TED Talks, as I'm a fan of TED Talks, I've watched this guy Simon Sinek, who loves to speak on this principle that he has called the Golden Circle. And the Golden Circle focuses on this ideology and this notion that you should always focus on why you're doing something rather than what you're doing. And I think that played very well, and it connected with me, 100%. Rules and strategies to me is the exact same thing as why versus what. And Simon Sinek argues that if we focus on why we're doing something, we're going to be able to make a much more personal connection with people than rather focusing on what we do. Rita, I've known for a little while, but this is the first time I've heard you speak, and we are like kindred spirits in the way that we were raised. My mother is Moroccan, and so I've got a little bit of that ingrained lifestyle and hospitality that you were talking about was every day, and on top of my mother being Moroccan, we're also Sephardic Jews. So it's like the double love to entertain, and it's like Jewish entertaining with Arabic phraseology. It was like the double home run every day, and my mother completely lived and embodied this notion from when I was this tall that the guest is on a pedestal, and when somebody comes in, we need to do and focus on everything that we can to make that experience personal and special and over the top caring for, to the extent that anytime we had people spending the night, my mother always kicked me out of my bedroom and told me to sleep on the sofa so we could give my bedroom up to other people, and that's the hospitality that's ingrained, I think, in a lot of that Middle Eastern, North African culture. We started talking about the Welcome Conference, and when I started meeting with Will and Anthony and they were describing to me the Welcome Conference, they started talking to me about all these amazing speakers that are here today. And we just got to hear Simon King, and you guys are going to hear later from Jeffrey Katz and Will, and Anthony's been speaking, and we got to see the incredible talents of pineapple carving. And when we started talking, I started, listening to Will and Anthony about this panel that they've assembled. Collectively, I think between everyone, there's almost 20 Michelin stars. That's amazing, by the way. And some people, like the Canlis brothers, unfortunately, Michelin's ignorance doesn't even go to Seattle, so they're not even eligible. If it did, they would have 3, right? And our collective body of restaurants have 0 Michelin stars. Right? And so I'm sitting there having a conversation with Will and Anthony. I said, well, there's a disconnect. I don't know that I belong with this panel of, badass all-stars. We do something very different, and Will sort of just touched base on that. And so, I asked him, I said, well, why am I here? What do you want me to do? And he said, I'd love it if you spoke on exactly that point. Let's focus on what differentiates our family of restaurants from a lot of the amazing, fine dining establishment backgrounds that some of the speakers of today are coming from. And I said, all right, if that's what you want, I hope it's not a disappointment to everybody else, because I don't have that 4-star service. Or at least it's not been acknowledged that way. I'd like to think that we do go pretty hard, but, some other critics feel a little bit differently. So, I figured the best way we should go about this is I was going to sort of tell the story about how I went about forming our first restaurant, Joseph Leonard, and what was the process that I went through. I made this decision that what I wanted to do is I wanted to build a neighborhood restaurant, right? And that was not enough. It wasn't articulated enough. I didn't define that notion enough. And so I started saying, well, all right, well, what does a neighborhood restaurant mean? And I started to study examples of a lot of my favorite restaurants and places that I thought really embodied great neighborhood restaurants. And every time I started thinking about the places I thought were amazing neighborhood restaurants, and I tried to challenge myself to be able to articulate what made them a great neighborhood restaurant, what ended up continuously happening was a realization that I have a very poor vocabulary and a lack of vernacular. And I kept coming to this stump that I didn't know how to really properly articulate what I thought a great restaurant was in words, but I knew damn well what it was in a feeling, right? I knew that I felt a great neighborhood restaurant. I believe that a great neighborhood restaurant was these intangible, esoteric, ethereal feelings. It was a feeling of heart and soul, and that's where we chose to sort of name this topic is heart and soul is what a neighborhood restaurant's all about. Well, great. I knew I wanted a neighborhood restaurant. I knew that a neighborhood restaurant meant that it had heart and soul, but how the hell do you turn that into an employee manual? You know, how do you sit there and hire a whole bunch of people and say, here, we want to be a great neighborhood restaurant. Here's how we do it, with heart and soul. You know, I mean, I would probably be looking at a lot of people that are looking back at me saying, okay. So really, when I started to think about heart and soul, I started dissecting it more, and I started going a little bit further down the rabbit hole. I came to this conclusion that I think is really sort of the foundation of my opinions on neighborhood restaurants. And that foundation is, I believe that not every restaurant in a neighborhood is a neighborhood restaurant, all right? And I think that there is a very, very sharp difference. And there are many great, amazing restaurants in neighborhoods that are not neighborhood restaurants. So then, if I have that opinion and that sort of, thesis, I needed to start to figure out, well, what separated the two? What made one a great restaurant in a neighborhood, and what made another a neighborhood restaurant? And I knew one thing that I connected with immediately was that neighborhood restaurants to me were casual. All right, I thought inherently, by definition, by core values and beliefs, they needed to be casual. You know, casual can express itself in so many different ways. Casual can be the design. You know, casual can be the music. Casual can be your approach to food or beverage or cocktails. And I thought that we did all of those. Unfortunately, I think all too often when people take a casual approach to service, that manifests itself in a way that does not resonate with me. And a casual approach to service can come across as lack of knowledge, lackadaisical, lack of core set of attention to detail and service points. And none of that was going to be acceptable to me. I knew that we wanted to be casual, but we had to have all of these, pristine attentions to detail. We needed to find our version of 4-star service, and we needed to know our menu descriptions as well as everyone at EMP does. And we needed to know our wine list fluently, but we were going to do it while we were listening to Jay-Z, and we were wearing t-shirts, and we were wearing jeans. And that's how we needed to do it, and that was going to be our version of casual. It wasn't going to be casual and then ignorant, right? I also felt that all the neighborhood restaurants that I loved were really fun places, right? Now, I've had some amazing experience at very, very high-end restaurants and fine dining establishments, and I have had fun at those dining experiences. But I don't know if you guys all agree with me. There's something different between the fun that I have at a fine dining establishment and the fun that I experience in my own restaurants and more casual places. They're both fun, but there were different types of fun. And again, my lack of vocabulary continued to stump me. So I keep going back to heart and soul. It's a feeling. And I knew there was a type of fun I was chasing. And the type of fun that I was chasing was dressed down. It was going to be a little bit raucous at time, but it had to be serious. And so when I started to think, how do we make it fun and how do we make it serious? I started thinking back to my experiences when I was a bartender, right? And I remember being a bartender before I ever opened my own restaurant. And I remember waking up at home, taking a shower, putting on my fresh clothes, like loving my outfit, looking at the mirror before I go to work. Stulman looked fucking good today, right? Check myself out. when you wear your own clothes, you got that great feeling of self-confidence. I get out the door. I used to ride a hot pink BMX with pegs and everything. I'd ride my bike to work down in Tribeca. I'd get to work. I'd walk in. I was feeling good, high-fiving everybody, what's up? And then I would walk down through the kitchen, down to the basement, to the locker room. And I started to take off my layers of individuality. I started to take off my clothes and put on my uniform, my all black outfit, black pants, black shirt, black tie, white apron, black shoes. And I felt this thing happened. It was like part of my identity was being peeled away, and although I was being told it's all about who you are, it was all about who you are in my box of all about who you are. And so I'd put on my outfit, but I wasn't going to let that ruin the day, and then I'd march back upstairs, and I was still all smiles because, that wasn't enough to mess it up. And then I'd start working service all night. And man, I hear the same Dave Brubeck playlist like 4 times on loop. And I love Dave Brubeck as much as the next person, but Friday night at 9 p.m. when I'm trying to build a vibe and my boss is asking me to pack the room with regulars, I'm like, I can't have this guy hear this same song twice during his meal. Like, you need to pick up this playlist program, and you want me to make this place live with people my age. I got a different playlist. I got an iPod too, man. Let me plug this in. I'll show you live. And he wasn't having it. He was just, you don't know what you're talking about. We're going to play our music, and you're going to wear on my all-black outfit. Okay, great. And then he also had these rules. You can't drink on the job. And I was like, can't drink on the job? What do you mean I can't drink on the job, right? And here's the reality. I guarantee this doesn't happen at any of the panelists' restaurants. But, I tell you what, man, when I used to work at other restaurants, and this is going to influence my whole ideologies, you know what happens at a lot of restaurants, save these, a lot of restaurants that have the no drinking policy, here's what staff does. They use coffee mugs and put their alcohol in coffee mugs. And then you look like, oh man, I just love tea, man. Fucking, I am working this coffee mug tonight, right? And so that's what I would do. I would wear my all black, I'd listen to Dave Brubeck, and I'd sip my beer out of coffee mug, and then at the end of the night, I'd watch the manager come sit down and order some steak or foie gras off the menu and eat it in front of me while I was buffing down the bar. And there was this disconnect, and I was like, man, I recognize that you're my boss, but hey, the last time I ate was at family meal with you. What's up with the hierarchy split here? I'm going to be gone after you. And what would happen is, I'd finish, I'd go back down to the locker room, I'd put back on my clothes, I'd feel awesome, I'd go upstairs, I'd high-five my friends, and we'd go out and we'd drink and we'd have a great time. And so I sort of felt like that was a great point to start off on how I was going to build JL. I was going to take all of that, and I was going to say, there's something missing for me there. And the thing that's missing for me in that whole situation is it didn't celebrate the individuals more. And I knew that in order to have a fun, casual neighborhood restaurant, the first place it needed to start with our team. And we needed to assemble this all-star team. And this team that we needed to put together, I needed to make it as much about them as it was about me. Because if it was just about me, number one, it made me feel like I'd be forever tied to the restaurant. What if I wanted to open another place? And somebody came into Joseph Leonard, well, where's Gabe? Oh, he's not here. He's at the other restaurant. Oh, it's not the same when Gabe's not here. So it can't be about me. It needs to be about all of us so that nobody misses or feels it when I'm not here. The other reason why I didn't want it to be just about me is because I felt like if it was just my expression, we were funneling or putting a box on how many people we could create emotional connections with. But if it was about me and the bartender and the waiter and the maitre d' and the cook, and it was all of our personalities, we then had more tools, a greater arsenal to connect with more people. And if we connected with more people, we could make more regulars, right? So all of these things started to really develop my practices. And these were how I began to articulate. And I started to put in those words as intangible things that I didn't really know how to figure out. Started to come into words. And I said, all right, it's about casual, it's about fun, it's about friendly, it's about the people that come together. we need to have some policies that really support this ideology. I felt like I needed more freedom, so with the more freedom, I need to give it now. So we started all these policies. Our staff's allowed to wear their own clothes. It's awesome. I see them coming to work, and most people spend way more money on their personal clothes than on their work clothes. So wear those $300 jeans instead of your H&M black pants. Like, you feel better in them, and you look better in them. Great. This is a win-win. And you're smiling. Awesome. Bring your own music. We got to put some parameters. I mean, I don't want to hear any hair bands at 8 o'clock, and I love Nina Simone, but we have a rule. It can't happen after 5 p.m. There's certain things that got to build a vibe, but we let everyone bring their own music, and the impact of it is tremendous, right? Everybody brings their own music, and here's what happens almost every night when people are playing their own music. I see my bartenders and my wait staff, they're just doing their thing while they're punching in buttons in the computer, and then they go, and they're like, yeah, man, awesome. Hey, how you doing? And they're vibing to their own soundtrack, and it's like a dance party in their own emotions. It's great. The energy is building because the whole thing is built around this idea that if the staff is having fun, then that fun is going to permeate and go directly to the guests. And I needed to do whatever I could by any means necessary to make sure the staff was having fun, because if they were having fun, the guests would have fun, and if the guests were having fun, the vibe would be right, and if the vibe was right, then we would become a neighborhood restaurant. So I had all that, but there were some other things that I needed to figure out, and I'm totally blowing on time. My team who's here knows that I'm horrible at this, but Will, Anthony, pull out the hook whenever you need to. And so I knew some other things were, I needed to think about what are some of the systems and the structures that sort of develop and build the restaurant. And accessibility was something to me that was key to a neighborhood restaurant. And I had all these experiences in my past at the Little Owl that gave me a couple of opinions about accessibility. I watched the Little Owl start from a very much a neighborhood restaurant, and it's super small. It got super hot. It still is hot, and it became a very, very much in-demand restaurant. And within no time, it got on to a situation where it was booked a month in advance. Every day at 10 a.m., you needed to call to book a table 4 weeks to the day later. What happened through the process of its rocketing success was I saw a transition where the Little Owl started as a great neighborhood restaurant, and it evolved in my mind to being a great restaurant in a neighborhood. And therein lied the difference. The big change that I saw was with the reservations in that small room, we were opening ourselves up for people from around the city, from around the country, from around the world to book tables, and that's what was happening. Everyone heard about the restaurant, everybody wanted to come. As all of the tables were filling up with people from around the world, you know who they weren't filling up with? The guy who lived upstairs across the street or around the corner. And as I was the maitre d', I started hearing all these people's frustrations, and they were getting upset, about, oh man, I used to love coming here, but I can't get in anymore. Because most of the people who live across the street are not waking up at 10 a.m. to make a reservation 4 weeks to the day for the place across the street. And I knew that there was something directly connected to a reservation policy and being a neighborhood restaurant. And I made a decision from that experience that Joseph Leonard needed to be no reservations, or if it wasn't going to be no reservations, it had to be very low reservations. It needed to always be accessible to the people that live across the street and around the corner. The other thing that influenced me when I used to live in the Lower East Side and I was dreaming up this restaurant was I love places that you can experience different things, breakfast, lunch, snack time, dinner, cocktails. I used to spend a lot of time at Schiller's. Schiller's is a huge influence and inspiration to me, particularly in the early 2000s. Anybody who lived, Rivington, Suffolk area, 2002, 2003, before most of the explosion of that neighborhood, that was a quintessential neighborhood restaurant. And that and Sir Keith McNally crushed it there with being a place very much for locals. And they also had that no reservation policy there. And so I knew Joseph Leonard also needed to be open all day. Now all the pieces were starting to come into play. A neighborhood restaurant had to be open all the time. It needed to have little to no reservations. It needed to be fun. How do we have fun? We celebrated the identity of the team, and so then all these things really started to evolving into just a ton of gray area. And all of our policies are full of gray area, and gray area is a pain in the ass to manage, by the way. It's so much easier to make all your rules black and white, but we spend all this time obsessing about, all right, we need to color in all the shades of gray. Well, you can drink on the job, but last night you had a little too much. So let's focus on that, right? And I mean, that's just a lot of work, right? Hey, I love your freedom of clothing, but not that shirt. So do you have a different shirt? Or, learning that we needed to add all these colors like, oh, sleeveless shirts they're fine on women. Dude with armpit hair, not a good look. So wait a second, we can't have gender-specific rules. So here's our new rule. You can wear a sleeveless shirt so long as you shave your pits. Next thing I know, I got a dude coming to work shaved pits. Fortunately, he's super buff with tattoos and he looks great. But I mean, that could have gone totally wrong. And all of these gray areas, absolutely make it a lot more work to manage. So we started, taking all of our individuality and all of our spirit and the collective us. Will, Anthony, yes, gotta go. Oh, yeah? All right, you yank me, seriously. I'm wrapping up, though, all right? So, we started really applying this to a whole bunch of, how do we take who we are and really bring it to the guests? And so we started to think about all of our cultural practices. And we started, it all started one night. I was the maitre d' at Joseph Leonard. This woman came in. She wanted to know what the wait was. I told her it was about 45 minutes. I mean, this woman, she put on a hissy fit. I mean, literally like a schoolgirl. I can't believe 45 minutes. And I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry. We can take your number if you don't want to wait here. Oh my God, I can't believe, and I'm sitting there. She was fuming. And I don't know what came over me, but I just made this decision. I just stepped forward. I grabbed her, and I just pulled her in, and I just held her very closely. And I moved my head right to her ear, and I said, "It's gonna be okay. We're going to feed you tonight. I promise." And I watched this girl's shoulders go from up by her ears to drop. And then she just looked at me, and she said, "Wow. I'm sorry for overreacting. I needed that." And I said, "Yeah, all right, it's great, And then she ended up having a great meal. And then on her way out, she came and interrupted a talk that I was having with somebody, and she gave me a hug. And we started a competition out of that at our company, and it exists at all of our restaurants. And we now have this really unorthodox competition at every single one of the restaurants every night. It's who can get the most unsolicited hugs, right? And literally, you've got every tool that you want. You want to give away stuff. You want to play music. You got the lighting. Whatever. You can't ask for a hug, right? It needs to be unsolicited. And we started these crazy competitions, and from that were born other crazy competitions. My sister's the general manager of Fedora, right? And she's a big Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure fan. So she decided to start the Ziggy Piggy contest, right? And she said, you know what we're going to do? She went and bought a bronze pig on a plaque, and she said, everybody that comes in, whoever orders the most food and does the best job eating it, we're going to give them a bronze pig and tell them to take a picture with it. And people started freaking out, and we were like, you're the Ziggy Piggy winner. And people were like, what? And then everyone just started, all the Ziggy Piggy winners started coming back with all their friends 2 days later. And these all sort of led to, we have this mantra, treat locals like celebrities and celebrities like locals, right? Because everybody loves being made to feel special. So we have, these other crazy policies, which is every waiter, every bartender in every restaurant has a rule. Every night, you have to pick one stranger in the dining room who you've never served before, and you have to give them something on the house. Right? The only rule is you can have never met them. And as long as you do that to one person a night, we're going to build more regulars. Because what you're going to do is you're going to take this person and you're going to make them feel special. And if we make people feel special and we make it fun, we are going to be a neighborhood restaurant. If we do all these things, we're going to be full of heart and soul. And it was all about how do we fill this place with heart and soul. And we took all of these things and it started to work. And, really the ultimate test, and this is the wrap up, my friends. The ultimate test was on October 18th. About 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I was upstairs. I used to live above Joseph Leonard, a couple flights above, and I was sleeping, and it was 6 a.m, and I heard a crash of the windows of the restaurant, and I heard sirens, and I pushed open my French windows, and I leaned my head out, and lining and surrounding all of Joseph Leonard were fire trucks, and I was alone in my apartment. I had just gotten married a month earlier, and my wife was in Miami for her grandmother's 90th birthday. I was like, holy shit, right? And I just grabbed clothes. I ran downstairs without a shirt on and shoes in one hand and shirt in another, and I'm running downstairs, and there's all these fire trucks, and they are just trashing the restaurant. Fire hoses in, just literally I'm watching furniture get thrown out the window, and I'm alone, and it's devastating. And there's this little triangular park right in front of Joseph Leonard, and I sit down on the curb,
And I'm just sort of like burying my head in between my hands, thinking, holy shit, this doesn't get any worse than this. And what started to happen was everybody in the neighborhood started coming by and putting their hands on my shoulders. And they started hugging me. And cards started coming. And flowers started coming. And everybody that had restaurants in the neighborhood over the days and weeks that followed started saying, hey, if you want to send some of your employees here to work for a couple of months while you rebuild your restaurant, I'll hold on to them and you can have them back the day you need them. And if you want to take over our restaurant for a day and do a fundraiser for your restaurant, you can have our restaurant for a night. And this insane outflow of love and support washed over in the days and the weeks that followed this fire. And that was the most touching thing. That was the moment that really validated every single one of our values and beliefs. It validated all of these things that I'm talking to you about. It validated the ways that we dressed and the music that we listened to and the craziness that we had. We had heart and soul. We succeeded in connecting with people. We loved everybody and we put as much love as we could out there into that neighborhood. And in that moment when we were down and out and I thought I was alone, I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by a neighborhood that said, we're going to build you back and we're going to build you stronger. And ever since then, they have showered us with love. And we may not be sitting up here with a bunch of Michelin stars, but I got thousands of hugs. And those thousands of hugs have helped us turn Joseph Leonard, one 34-seat restaurant, into 6 restaurants. And for everyone out there who's ever come and given us a hug or come and spent a penny of their hard-earned dollars with us, thank you so damn much. And thank you for your love and support. You have no idea how much it means to us and how much we give it back. And we breathe and dream about how to make your time with us better. And I can't wait to see you in one of our restaurants again. Thank you for having me.